and welcome to my channel. Well, I got another little neck knife in. This one was donated to the channel by an anonymous viewer, and thank you, because I get into different things, I mean, I'll right now I'm in my neck knife phase. And I've had neck knives and little knives and stuff before, and a lot of people look at these and they don't understand um, what they're for, basically. And Cold Steel is a pretty good company that makes no bones about a lot of times that their knives are for many times defensive use. So I had a little conversation basically with somebody who lived over in England, because I put a picture of when I was in England. I had some brass knucks, a dagger, nunchucks, throwing stars. All these things are illegal in England now. In many cases, even to possess some of these things, even if you keep them in your house, they don't even want you to have it. And a person wrote to me, and I'm not slamming this person at all. I understand where they're coming from. He said that he's lived in England for 60 years and he's never needed to defend himself, and that because of his society, he feels safer. Well, that's true. If everyone around you is civilized and you never run into a situation where you have to defend yourself, then that's working for you. That's good. I live in America. I live in Texas, okay? So we have the right to self-defense. And a knife is really a last-ditch way of defending yourself. If you get down to that point, all the other things you should have been doing have failed you. Like situational awareness. Maybe it was somebody had targeted you. You just went to the bank. You're not thinking about somebody's targeting you, because that's in movies and stuff like that. It happens here. And it's usually older people, too. They'll see an old person, go to the bank, pull out their Social Security check money or whatever, and follow them. And it's awareness. It's not being aware that you're being followed and all this other stuff. They'll target you and they'll come up and they'll rob you. And not all criminals are just like, oh, just hand over the money. It's just money. Sometimes it's your life. It's your life. If you put up any resistance at all or whatever, they want to take out not just your money, but your life. In that situation, what are you going to do? Call the cops? No, like I said, everything has failed. You lost your situational awareness, and it's now down to you to defend yourself. And you got to make a split-second decision. Do I defend myself, or do I just hope that this guy won't kill me? I like options, These are get-off-me type knives. Somebody grabs you, somebody, knocks you down or whatever, and you're on the ground. You start cutting ankles and casts, and you're doing two things. One, you're not an easy mark, and second, if all else fails, they have DNA. They have the criminal's DNA in the form of blood, and they will be able to maybe avenge you. Like I said, I'm from a different society. I don't go looking for fights. I consider myself more like a porcupine or a skunk, Other animals don't mess with them. Why? Because they found out, like honey badgers. They look like they're small and everything, but they find out, man, if they're willing to defend themselves and they have the means to defend themselves, other animals leave them alone. And criminals are not civilized. They're not operating on the same mentality as you. They don't think the same way. All they see is victim. They're kind of like wolves that hunt in packs. What do? They go after the main top alpha, herd animal? No, they go for the weak and the sick. Why? Because they're easy. They're easy to take down. And why do they go against the easy stuff? Because they have less of a chance of getting hurt. So You make that choice. If you live in a society and you want the police to protect you, guess what? You've got to have people that think that way too. And you've got to have a lot of police. And you put all your protection in the hands of the police. Well, guess what happens when riots happen and everything else? Here in America, a lot of times, the police are not required by law to protect you individually. Even though they say to protect and serve and all that, they have liability immunity. They could sit there and say, hey, we're just here to protect society at large, not you in particular. If something happened, well, sorry. When things break down, like floods or tornadoes, and people start looting and everything else, words are not going to stop people. Words are not going to stop people that want to take things from you. They don't care. And so it's up to you. I don't like being a victim. I don't like that. I try not to put myself in situations where I have to defend myself. But if you take a little knife like this and you think, oh, I'm going to go. I saw one comment where a person, it wasn't necessarily this Kyoto, but it was another one of the mini leathernecks or something. And a person said, the handle bent when he went to baton wood with it. Well, look, this one's full tang and everything. A lot of these, you put a magnet on it, there's a tang in there. It's not a rat tail tang, it's a stick tang. All right, it just comes up to a square. First off, it's the whole thing about batoning wood again is why? I know some people say, well, you have to get to dry wood, and all that other stuff. Really, you should watch that video where the guy's talking about how you can find dry material even in a wet forest. The guy was in like Canada or something where it was raining a lot, or Oregon, where it rains a lot. And they're able to make fires in a wet place because it's your mind. It's all in how you can have the best tool in the world, for batoning wood and everything. And if you didn't carry a Bic lighter with you or something like that, then yeah, that's lack of preparedness on your part. And sometimes we get into those situations. I saw one where a woman recently, the car hydroplaned and she went off into a ditch, and she got out of her car. How? By breaking out the sunroof. Now, if you've got a neck knife on you, you're not being hindered by your seatbelt. I've had seatbelts seize up on me before where they wouldn't release. Imagine that if you're going underwater and your seatbelt won't let you go. How are you going to get out of that? Call the police? No. You have to take care of yourself sometimes. And it's not always criminals. Sometimes it's having a knife available and at hand and ready is the only thing that's going to save your butt. Yeah, it's rare. It's very rare. But guess what? If it happens to you and you're not prepared, it's the last rare thing you're going to run into. You're a statistic. So, yeah, when I first moved in here, in this city, I was going armed. And this was before Texas passed the, allowing you to be armed without a permit. And I did that because you've got to make a choice sometimes. With criminals, they don't obey laws, so they can carry whatever they want. And if they know that society as a whole is restricted from carrying weapons and everything, well, it's easy for them. All they have to do is sit there and attack somebody when they're least expecting it. But if they have a possibility that anybody, that old lady or whatever, or that old man is packing, old people don't care, man. We're old. We've gotten to the point where we've lived most of our life. So if you try to take something away from us, man, a lot of times we have attitudes too. We're not gonna, We're not going to be a victim. We're not going to let you roll us over. So, yeah, surprise, you know, uh, that thing that looked like it was slow moving and easy to take, all of a sudden you got quills in your hands, you know. If you're on the ground and someone's kicking you, or a group of people are kicking you, and you pull out a knife and start cutting ankles, or slashing calves or whatever, within reach, guess what? You can outrun them then. It's pretty hard to chase someone down when you're lost your Achilles tendon or somebody hit you in the femoral artery. So, you know, I wish everybody was civilized and nice and treated everyone with respect, but that's not the reality in my world. Maybe it is in yours, and I'm not criticizing you for that. You know, I have to live where I live and survive any way I can. And yeah, you know, I mean, I have had early in life situations where if I didn't have a firearm and didn't use it, I wouldn't have sisters right now. I wouldn't have a nephew, you know, or a niece. I would have these people around because someone was trying to uh, end their life or attack them, you know. And in that case, it was both of my sisters and a niece. So if you look at pictures of me when I was young, and one of those pictures is a brother-in-law that at the time he was dating my sister, but you could tell, man, its size. I look like I don't even think I was 90 pounds, but I looked like I was a kid, you know? And this guy was attacking my sister. I mean, he'd already knocked her out. I went over there with a gun and I was going to stop that. Fortunately, everything worked out and I didn't have to use it. But he was like 200 and something pounds and I was less than 90. But what equaled it out? I had a pistol and I was willing to use it to stop aggression. Now, that makes an impression on your life if you ever have that happen. I had basically like PTSD from that even before I knew what PTSD was, because for the longest time I couldn't talk about that without my voice, my throat constricting, because I put myself in that situation again. And even though it's been, I don't know, like 50 years or more since that happened, it still affects me. You know, it made an impression upon me. And it made an impression upon the person that was doing that too, because he realized that you can't judge a book by its cover. You can't look at someone and think, you know, I outweigh that person by 250 pounds. This self-defense, with whatever means you've got, is like an equalizer, all right? It's like they said, you know, God created man equal, or created men or whatever, supposedly, but Samuel Colt made them equal, you know. Then it doesn't take a lot to defend yourself if you've got the means of reaching out and touching someone. And with knives, a lot of times, for self-defense, yeah, you'd want something with a longer blade, just because you don't have to get as close. But again, if it's protecting yourself from someone coming up and snagging you, let's say like a woman jogging or something like that, a lot of times people will just ride up in a van and pick them up. You know, they're bigger than women. They'll put them in a bear hug or something, or come up behind them, and they've snatched them. Guess what? If they could get to a knife and inflict some damage on that person, they probably wouldn't get abducted. And yeah, you know, it's bad to be in a society where you have to think about that. Coyotes too. There's just not just people. There are coyotes out there, real coyotes, that have attacked children and stuff like that. Now, you might think, I don't want a kid, carrying a knife or something like that. Well, then you got to be with them all the time to protect them. I mean, you can't let them walk to school or anything like that. And here, even in Texas, it's different for like kids and stuff carrying knives. Back when I was a kid, we had pocket knives, and we didn't really think of them as defensive weapons. It was just a tool. And for me, really, a lot of times, even though this is a neck knife and everything, it's the convenience of having a small knife. And I know what I'm going to do with it. Light task. It's still strong enough that, yeah, if you put this on wood and you start beating on this with, a baton and everything, my first question is why? Why were you doing that? If you've got a good reason or whatever, fine. But if it bends on you, I mean, that's on you. You're trying to make a knife do something it wasn't designed to do. Also, on one of my videos, a person was talking about when I do triad locks, how I made it a little bit easier to close them by weakening the spring a little bit. And a person wrote that they wouldn't depend upon the knife for self-defense after that. You know what? I took these knives that I did this with, and I got my fingers out of the way, and I spine whacked them on bricks really hard. I mean, enough to start cratering the brick. The lock didn't fail. All right, if it's going to survive that in a defensive use, this thing is not going to fold on you if you hit bone. All right, if you hit anything like that, it's not going to fold on you. So to dismiss a knife, as being no longer defensive, just because, all right, yeah, maybe if I stuck this in a tree and I hung my weight, idiotically, instead of I do it like this, where the lock is holding me, it wouldn't hold as much weight as before. That's still plenty enough weight for what I'm going to use it for, which is mostly opening packages and stuff like that. Really, the self-defense to me on a knife is really, it's not even a secondary option. It's like way down there, because if you're in a threatening environment, especially here in Texas, we have a means of protecting ourselves with something much better than a knife. But with that comes responsibility. If you lose a knife, you're not going to have to report it to the police. If you lose a firearm, yeah, you should report that to the police, because now a loaded weapon is running around there, and if somebody uses it in a crime, guess who it's coming back to? It's coming back to you. How did that weapon get there? And why didn't you report it as stolen? And, stuff like that. So there's more responsibility with carrying a firearm. You have to protect it from getting snatched from you. And you've got to be, in your mind, you've got to be willing to use it. You can't just bluff with stuff like that. On knife fights, a lot of times it's one-sided. It's the person that has the knife, uses it, and a lot of times the person that doesn't have the knife doesn't even know they've had the knife if they're getting in a fight until afterwards, unless they hit something really vital. But very few people want to continue aggression if they've been slashed and bleeding or punctured, And if you know what you're doing, it is a last ditch type of thing. But I'm not prepared to go around and think that there's going to be a cop there when I need one. There's going to be somebody that steps up and says, "Hey, don't pick on that old guy." And yeah, all of when I was in England, I never, I was there a little over a year. I never needed to use a knife for self-defense. I did have to defend myself from a drunk one time, but I mean, it didn't involve a knife or anything. But there are, even in England, There are people that don't care about laws and and have weapons and stuff like that. And yeah, it's fine if you want to live in a society that's completely disarmed. But guess what? During World War II, they needed us to send guns to them. Why? Because their population was totally disarmed and they were about to be invaded by Germany. They were expecting a land invasion. And guess who was going to have to defend it? Their army wasn't enough to protect them. They needed the help of the citizens. And if the citizens haven't been practicing or familiar with the use of firearms, then you got a whole nother issue. You got to go through training and all this other stuff. And then a lot of times they're not going to have the will to protect themselves because they expect society to protect them, the government. And, relying on the government to protect you is kind of like an ostrich burying his head in the sand. I can't see anything bad, so everything must be good. Meanwhile, your exposed butt is up in the air, and you're that vulnerable. So here in America, while this is still in effect, we have the right to self-defense. We have the right to protect ourselves, and it's not just, it's to keep the government from overreaching also. If the government gets to where it's trying to be oppressive and it's trying to control its citizens and it's going against everything, hey, as an American, we have the right to resist that. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, what good would that do against, A-10s and tanks and everything else? People always outnumber the military or law enforcement. The sheer number of people always outnumber them. And through whatever means, you get a mob even with pitchforks and machetes and stuff. If they're determined, a small little squad is not going to be able to stop them. So, I don't know. I know this is a big, long rant and everything, and some people are going to disagree with me. Hey, that's fine. You can live in a lot of these tropical places and everything else where everybody is friendly and nice, and you really don't even need to carry anything for self-defense because it doesn't happen. Hey, good. That's fine. Yeah, I agree. Life should be more like that. But you know what? If part of that is to say I've got to give up all weapons, I've got to let the government determine that, okay, you can have one of these, but you better not use it in self-defense because we're going to come after you. We don't like that behavior. We want you to call the police. Well, fine. That's fine if you want to live that way. I've lived in a lot of different countries. I've been around the world. I've seen different societies. And just like any other place, there are good places that you can go and there are bad places. There are bad places that you might get put in England, for example, where you're vulnerable for being there, whether you know it or not. You're in somebody else's territory, and they may or may not come at you. Like I said, I don't have a lot of experience. I was born in England, but I left there when I was 6 months, and I came back when I was in the service. And after I got out of the service, I stayed there, like another 6 months or so before my wife got out of the service also. So I have experience as living over there as in the military and also as a civilian. And I had situations where there were people where it got dicey, but I had something on me if it did come down to that. And like I said, if I would have used it, knowing what I know now, even back in the 80s, yeah, I'd have been in trouble, because what I had on me was not allowed in that society. But nobody saw it. Nobody saw it. Nobody knew about it. And, call it luck or whatever, but I got away with it. I'm not condoning that because you have to do what you have to do in your society to get by. If the law says that you can't have anything more than a 3-inch blade, well, even though this thing looks dinky and everything, it's more than a 3-inch blade. uh, 3 1/4 inch. That 1/4 inch can be the difference between legal and illegal. And you just have to know, the laws of your society and what's allowed and what's not allowed. If you also know that if you use this, rather than going after the criminal and the person that obviously was doing something illegal, they want to get you because they don't want to encourage society to start defending themselves. They're worried about kind of like the wild, wild west syndrome, where there are no laws and anybody can pretty much do what they want and might makes right. I've never liked that. That's kind of like the bully situation. The strongest person not only is a bully, but they usually have a crowd, a group of weaker people with them so that they have numbers and also, with them to help them. Because, why? Because bullies are cowards. Criminals are cowards. They go after the weak. They don't go after the strong. And if you present yourself as somebody who's not going to be taken advantage of, a lot of times that's enough to not make you a victim. Also, if you're aware of your situation, if you're not walking down the street looking at your phone and not being aware of what's going on and you're in a bad neighborhood, no amount of self-defense weapons are going to help you because your head's in a cloud. You're not... It's bad. I know it's bad to have to think that way, but that's life. I'm sorry. That's life. In America, that's life. In the world, a lot of times, criminals they're looking for targets of opportunity. It's nothing about you personally other than you look like an easy mark. You're there, something that they can prey upon. And, yeah. It's not 100% safe, like somebody could walk up behind you, conk you over the head, and take everything. Well, next time you're going to be more paranoid, you're going to be watching your back a little bit more, or you're going to try to figure out what you did wrong. It's traumatic. Violence is always traumatic. That's why the only people that push for wars are people that have never been in one. The only people that talk a lot of crap about self-defense a lot of times is because they've never had to defend themselves. They're good at studying choreographed moves, and they fight with a partner that says, okay, I'm going to do this and you do that, In war and in conflict, there are no rules. The rule is survive by whatever means possible. And if it means fighting dirty or doing something unexpected, then, hey, you live to tell the story about it. And when you get older, it's, you think, well, they're not necessarily going to kill you. I bruised my ribs just from trying to reach and get a knife, and it took me out for like a week. You imagine if somebody was going to like kick you or punch you or everything, and you're old? I'm going to be 67 next month. And like I said, I came from a different time, when yeah, there were violent people back then. There are violent people now, but anyways, the main thing, about neck knives and everything else is this is convenient. Having this around my neck is convenient because it's within reach, and I use it for for what I use most of my knives for. Opening packages, playing around. I like throwing them at crickets and stuff like that, because it's fun. I mean, if you're not enjoying yourself and you're not having fun, then to me, I like different size knives, and I like little knives. If you look at this one, you say, oh, that's a really little knife. All right, here's a 4-inch knife. If you look at the cutting edge, yeah, the handle's a little bit smaller. Then that might affect things and everything. It's no problem for me. I've got a small hand though, so this might not work for somebody. You put a little lanyard loop on there, and you've got something else that you can grab onto it with. There are things around that. But look, I mean, it's less than an inch. It's less than an inch difference in length. Which one's more capable? The one you got on you. If you've got a big, long, 7-inch fixed blade knife, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be awkward to carry around. That's why I like this SRKC, because it's got a long enough blade for me. I'm not going to be batoning with this. If I'm batoning wood, it's only going to be like a temporary thing, like to make a notch. You know, batoning wood is good like if you want to make a cut, a square cut or something like that. It's not processing lumber for a fire. If you like to do that, fine. You know, but to sit there and say, I took this knife here and I batoned a little piece of kindling and the handle bent. Well, you know, I think that's kind of silly to leave that comment up there, because you're implying that the knife is no good, when in reality, you're using it improperly. Some people may say, oh yeah, you know, it's advertised as full tang and it should be able to handle that. I disagree. You know, if I want to baton through wood for whatever reason, I'm going to use a sturdier knife to do it. And if the handle bends on something that wasn't designed for doing that, I think that's on me. I don't think that's on the knife. But anyway, yeah, there you go. I'm sorry I got on this little rant and everything, but yeah, you do whatever's legal in your society to protect yourself or to keep yourself protected. And if it involves, you know, you've got to have your own private defense force, and you pay the cops to come around, or you bribe officials or whatever it takes, you know. I'm not talking about England, just any society. Then, hey, whatever it takes to get by. But I'm not going to be a victim if I have any choice about it. If somebody attacks me, I'm not Superman. I'm not going to be able to withstand everything. So I don't go looking for trouble. But if a trouble comes to me, I'm prepared to be able to inflict some damage on somebody. If they're going to physically assault me, I'm going to try to inflict some damage. And I'll deal with that if I have to afterwards. You know, I'll deal with the consequences. But yeah, so you know, I'm not pushing these knives. I'm not trying to sell these knives to anybody. I'm not trying to tell everybody this is what you should do. You do whatever you want to do with knives, you know. I'm just telling you what I do with them. I like having the options. I like having options. I don't like to be in a situation. I've been in a situation where all I had was a knife and somebody else had a gun, and they were intent upon possibly doing damage to me and the other people in there. It's not a good situation to be in. It's not a good place to be in. It's sobering. I told myself after that I'll never put myself in that situation again, and I didn't, you know. But anyway, there you go. That's all I'm just saying is to ignore that a knife has self-defense capabilities is just to be limiting yourself, you know. If you sit there and say, oh, well, all I ever do is carve wood with it or cut open boxes, fine. You know, that's fine. You know, especially if somebody's lived that long in their society, well, then they understand their society. They know which places to go and not to go. And they don't put themselves in that situation. And for them, it's worked out fine. If you ever run into a situation where society collapses or situations, you know, happen and you're on your own, then what do you do if the police are not there to protect you? What do you do? Cry, whine, beg, plead? You know? No, thank you. I don't want to put myself in that situation. So there you go. I'm sorry I got on this rant and everything, but sometimes, I have strong opinions, and neither one of us are incorrect, in this situation. The person that lived over there in England, he's not incorrect for saying that he thinks that less weapons available lead to a more civilized society. Uh, if I remember correctly, kitchen knives and stuff are still around, and clubs and all this other stuff can be made. So no amount of limiting weapons is going to stop the ability of someone who wants to do you harm. You don't even need, you can use just common things like a vehicle to hurt a lot of people. So I mean, there's no real way to protect yourself from everything. But to sit there and think that if we take away all the availability of people to have stuff, there's going to be less crime. You know what? They've studied and they've found that when average citizens are allowed to have weapons and everything, the amount of just crime and stuff like that where people goes down, not goes up. It's not the narrative of less weapons equals less crime. No, all you do is you disarm the people that obey the laws. If you make it legal for someone to carry a weapon and defend themselves, then the criminal can't count on a person being unarmed. And it's that unknown factor that in itself is enough to deter a lot of the crimes. It's not going to stop all of it. Anyways, there you go. This thing's going to take forever. It's 37 minutes. But I can't, I get on a rant and I can't stop myself. So anyways, thank you for listening to my rambling. You can disagree if you want and everything. That's fine. I'm not trying to convert everybody into armchair warriors and stuff like that. But I just wanted to let you know, in my experience, being able to defend yourself has saved lives. All right, it's not the other way around. It has saved lives. So I wish everybody peace and happiness. And thank you for listening, and have a nice day.